Hi y'all, Mike Peace Woodturning. Welcome back to my shop. I recently did a video on this Burl multi-axis vase. Now I was showing this during the Lancaster Coffee Hour Zoom meeting, and fellow woodturner Gerald Garrett suggested turning some cattails. And I thought that was a great idea. These are quick and easy, so let me show you how to make those. And be sure to stay tuned to the very end because I'll have a number of finishing tips and tricks. When I was looking for images of cattails, I couldn't find anything for free, so I generated this one with artificial intelligence, and I think it's a good representation of basically what we're going to turn today. So what does it take? Well, let's look at the wood we need. First of all, you need some type of darker wood. I'm using mahogany because I've got some available, and it's a nice color that I think is a good representation of the color of a cattail once it's turned. In addition, you'll need something to make stems out of. You can either buy these 1/8 inch or 3/16 inch dowels at a hobby shop, hobby store, or the other alternative that's quick and easy is to get some bamboo skewers. You can get those in about 1/8 and the 1/16 of an inch, and a little bit goes a long way. They're very inexpensive at the Dollar Tree, Walmart, what have you. So those are great. They're great for other things in your shop. The other thing you can use, as we'll talk about at the end, is making leaves. And for those, you're going to use craft sticks. You can get wide ones, you can get narrow ones. I can remember back in the day when you had to eat a popsicle to be able to get a popsicle stick, but I guess this is progress. So what size? You know, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to make them about 3/4 inches square by about 3 inches long. You could make them maybe 1 inch by 5 inch. Depends on what kind of container you're going to put them in. Now, you could turn these between centers, but I find it easier if you can to put them in a smaller set of jaws that'll hold the square blank, and just do 1/2, and then we're going to turn around and do the other half. I'm going to be using these spigot jaws on my Record Power SC3 chuck, but you know the new Versalock Record Power with their 35mm long dovetail insert jaws would work well as also. But I'm sure you've probably got something else that would work just as well. So you can round this off with spindle roughing gouge, but for something this small I prefer to use a chisel, a skew chisel. I'll get to speed up a little bit. I'm just going to take a planing cut. I'm not going to use the full width of the blade, just a little bit at a time. Just get it round. A little bit more to go. Now I'm just going to round over the end of this cattail. And there we go. Now we're going to drill a small hole. You could do this with an electric drill, but I find it hard to get it the hole squared up, and drilling it on the lathe is fast and easy. I'm just going to make a little divot there. And then I'm going to use this little hand drill, 1/8 inch and a handle. If you're real fussy, you could of course use a Jacob's chuck mounted in the tail stock, but this works just fine. We'll get the speed down about 700, 500 to 1,000. Just put it straight in, and we don't have to go in but about 3/4 of an inch. So once you get it rounded, you can just quickly touch up the sanding. I just like to round over this end a little bit, using maybe 120. Woo! Get rid of any sharp edges there. We can go up to 180. And I wouldn't sand it any finer than about 320. Now, we could probably quit there, but I think to make it look a little more realistic, I want to use some texturing. So let me show you how we're going to do that. I'm using the Crown Micro texturing with the texturing wheel. That's the one that comes to a fine point as opposed to the one that's flat across. This is a Robert Sorby. I like this one better, but I have the one cutter on the Sorby and a different one on the Crown, so this works just fine. So you want to keep this perpendicular to the wood. You want to keep the speed down to no more than about 500 so you can control it. Rest it on the rest, and you're just going to quickly move back and forth, and you're going to lift it up. Let me show you. Lift it off the surface of the wood so you won't have a perfectly even pattern, and just work your way down. And so I've got these nice little textures. I'm going to bring this at about a 45-degree angle and just touch up on the end as well. And there we go. Now we're going to simply turn this around and reverse it. As long as you've got appropriate sized jaws and that you don't lock them down too tight so it mars the surface, you're going to be fine. And then we're just going to repeat that on this end just like we did the first end. We're going to turn it round. And round it over. Make that little divot. 3/4 of an inch or so. And then we're going to sand it and texture this and blend that in. Let me show you what that texture looks like. Now we're just going to remove it and work on the stem. The dowels are a little bit easier to cut without fraying the end than the bamboo. But I find that if you're careful, you can cut a little small tip for the top. You can use a flush cut saw. See it begin to fray a little bit. And then I also find once you get a little hole cut, you can use some little snippers and cut that. And you can always sand that in. What I do is I take the worst end and stick it inside the cattail. Now the other one, don't be too quick to cut it off until you figure out what vase it's going to go in, because you may need a longer shaft. If the stick is just a little bit too fat for the hole, just rub it a little bit on sandpaper, and that works good. The other alternative is if you've got a plumber's reamer, that's a great tip. You can put it in there and you can open up the hole just a little bit, and that's fast and quick. And then that will go in there. It doesn't have to go in there too far. You could use medium CA. I tend to prefer to avoid CA whenever possible. So tight bond, quick and thick, I like. Aleene's tacky glue works well. You can pick this up sometimes at the dollar store for about $1. Now I think adding a couple of leaves can really improve the realism of it and add a touch of class. So that's where the popsicle craft sticks come in. You can use the thin ones. I found that the longer, fatter ones, then you cut them in half, because these leaves are rather skinny, and then you can quickly shape them with a pocket knife. Of course, you could go over to a belt sander, but I find this works just very, very quick. You can kind of shape the edges a little bit. You don't have to get too fancy with it, and then use a little sandpaper to refine that cut just a little bit, get rid of any rough edges. And then down near the end, I would probably thin it out some as well. Because in most instances, what you're going to have to wind up doing is glue this on a rod extension with some. In this case, I do use super glue. I hit this with accelerator, and then I take my short shaft. Put a strip of medium glue on it and just hold it down like that for just a few seconds, and then that'll work fine.
To shape the leaves, just boil the popsicle sticks for a couple of minutes. While they're still hot, just form them around a small can with some rubber bands to put almost a right angle on them, or whatever angle you want. And this is what they look like when they're put together, some curved, some straight.
Then I want to dye them green, the stems and the flowers. Always use gloves when you're using dye. And I like to use this Chromacraft wood dye. It's an alcohol based, and it's got about 10% shellac, and it just works very well. Let me show you. And same thing with these shafts. So just put a little dye on a rag, and because that shellac, it dries very, very quick. And then set it aside and do all the glue up after the dry sets up. Same thing with the leaves. Add more dye to darken it. After it dries, it does better. It will build up once it's dry if you add another coat. And do this before you actually glue it up. Nature loves odds, so I'd use 1 or perhaps 3. And there you go. So if you missed that video on the burl vase, you can check it out with this link above. I know a lot of y'all will always have some tips and tricks after watching one of my videos. Please share them with the community by putting them in the comments below. And remember, y'all stay safe. Come on back, you hear?